I've been working nights for the last 4 years now, but for the last year specifically, I've been working nights in a store by myself as a baker. Everyone swears up and down that the stores are haunted, and yeah, it can get pretty creepy working alone all hours of the night. But I don't really believe in all that. It's mostly just getting freaked out by a creaky old building. Anyway, it's a fairly safe job. There are alarm systems in the store that alert you if a door is opened, and the managers can call or come by to check on you. For the most part, I'm in the back of the house just baking and doing my thing. So one night, I'm doing just that. Baking, listening to some music, and trying not to psych myself out about ghost stories and whatnot. I was working out of a smaller oven, which was mostly concealed from the front doors and windows by a massive cooling rack. It's not uncommon for your managers to show up unannounced because we do work by ourselves, and they want to make sure that we stay productive throughout our shifts. So when I heard the sound of the door attempting to be opened, I didn't think much of it at first, until a second later when it stopped and I didn't hear anything else. Glancing out the rack, I tried to see outside without drawing attention to myself, because as pathetic as it is, I still get a little scared that someone is trying to break into my store. As a single lady working nights, you learn to be a little paranoid. So moving on, there's no one at the door, and I assume that it's just the wind making it creak, so I continue on baking. Fast forward a little, it's about 2 in the morning, and I'm up front grabbing a drink from the soda machine, when I notice someone standing outside. It's obviously a man, and he's looking down at something in his hands. Yeah, it startled me, but there's a bar across the complex I work in, and it just closed. So I assume he walked over drunk and was on his phone or something. As per company policy, if someone is hanging out outside the store at night, you're supposed to call the cops and have them get rid of the person. Even though it's usually just someone using the Wi-Fi, we've been told it's a liability for the company in case that person gets robbed, or hurt, or whatever. So I'm thinking, alright, if he's still there for a little while, I'll call. I don't want to be a dick and call the cops on someone that's watching out for a cab, you know. That's when all of a sudden, he turned and looked up at me. He motioned for me to come to the window in front of where he was. I stood, sort of frozen for a moment, and then shook my head at him and walked to the back of the house where I could not be seen. I'm not gonna say it didn't creep me out. It really did. But worthy of losing my mind over it? No. So I began to bake again and told myself that it was just some drunk dude and that I needed to be on the lookout. A couple of minutes later though, I heard knocking on the front door. Knowing that we didn't have a truck coming that night and that if our managers didn't have the keys, they would just call, I ignored it, hoping that he would leave on his own. At this point, I definitely considered warning him that if he didn't leave, I would call the cops. But why give someone trying to come into a closed store late at night with one chick inside a warning? He knew what he was doing, drunk or not, and after working nights this long, you learn quick that there is absolutely nothing anyone needs to say to you in an isolated area at 2 in the morning. After a moment, the knocking stopped, and I got a little worried. I texted my manager, who told me to call the cops if I felt threatened, and that I should keep him posted. I checked to make sure the alarm was set and tried to avoid the front of the house as much as possible. It was quiet for a while after that. I checked a couple of times to see if he was out front, but I never saw him. About an hour passed, and nothing happened. I tried to stay upbeat and focused on my work. I went to go work in the small ovens again, and it was just as I was about to put some bread in the oven that I heard knocking on the front doors again. Only this time, it was really fucking loud, insistent, and angry. So I did what any normal person would, and I fell to the floor and hid. I went to reach for my phone to call the cops and realized it was charging on the other end of the cafe. I couldn't get to it without being seen because the entire front of the store is just made up of huge windows. Right as I made these connections, the banging got louder. It didn't sound like he was using his hands to hit the glass anymore. It sounded like he was using something heavy to hit the doors. So I'm sitting there, cowering under my baker's table, desperately hoping that this guy is just trying to scare me and not break in. Or that it's my manager trying to play a prank on me because he knows that I can get a little jumpy. Anything really to try to calm myself down. I run through my options. The first thing I decide is that, seen or not, I need to get my phone. So I run, ducking the entire way, and get to it. I quickly call 911, fill in the operator, and then I call my manager, who tells me he will be there as soon as he can. This is about the point where all my ovens decided to start going off. So thinking it would be good to avoid a giant fire in my cafe, I start to pull everything out that I can as quickly as I can. The knocking starts to move from the front door to other windows though, and sure enough, when I look directly behind me, he's fucking standing there with his hands cupped against the glass and he's looking right at me. That's when I noped the fuck out and hid in the back of the house. After a few minutes, I assume he gave up because the knocking stopped. After a few minutes though, I assume he gave up because the knocking finally stopped, and I heard sirens soon after, alerting me that the cops had arrived. I let them in, gave my statement, and they told me that they had checked the entire cafe but hadn't seen anyone. They did tell me, however, that all the tables and chairs were knocked over our front. I let them know that my manager was on his way, and they left, asking me to call them if anything happened. Unfortunately, there wasn't much else they could do. I saw them hang out for a while, and they left a little later with their sirens on again. My manager finally showed up and helped me finish the bake while I told him everything that had happened. The opening manager came in soon after and asked about the patio. It was a pretty uneventful finish to a pretty scary shift. It was so terrifying to think about afterwards though, because it would have been too easy to follow me. I felt terribly exposed and alone. The little details like the door trying to be open at the beginning of my shift came back to me soon after. Things you don't know for sure are connected, but you feel like they probably are. Maybe this guy was just super hungry or something, but it was super scary to me. I'm a young man who works at a discount retail store. It's not really all that interesting. My job is to come in around the night hours and straighten up the aisles and to assist customers. Usually when I offer assistance though, most people thank me for my work and then go off to get whatever else or to buy their stuff and leave. Except for one guy. I was straightening up the health and beauty items when some guy in his late 20s or early 30s came in wearing a tan baseball cap and a leather jacket. He came by and asked me how I was doing. I replied with that work enthusiasm everyone has to use at least once in their lives. And he begins talking to me, asking me about my work and such. I wasn't creeped out at this point, just thought he was being friendly. But when he walked off for a while and came back and began to ask me about myself, well, that's when things became a little uneasy. He asked me where I went to school, and I explained I wasn't in school at the moment. He acted as if he knew where I had gone to high school and started to make assumptions about the place, as if he had attended that school himself. Eventually, what got me into the, oh god, this guy isn't right moment, is when he asked me if I was good at organizing because he needed help at his home. I declined, of course, and moved on. Somehow, he even knew my schedule, which was even worse. That was 4 days ago, and I was called in by my supervisor, who I told everything to after the man had left, if I wanted to make up some hours and work tonight. I accepted and came down for my usual night shift. I felt alright, thinking that the man had given up after 4 days' time. But I was wrong. Around an hour and a half into my shift, I noticed a familiar figure, leather jacket, and tan ball cap. Immediately, I ducked into another aisle and kept alert. He was moving all around where he'd seen me the last time, looking around the aisles, but not finding what he was looking for. He left not too long after, but not before I informed my supervisor of him. The next time he came in, he was with 2 other people, or so it seemed. All of them were looking around and not really finding anything. One of the others who was with him was a woman who had filled up her cart but only bought some of the items, while the man who I spoke to before bought nothing and walked out, talking on his phone. After the store closed, I noticed a yellow car in the parking lot, moving all over the place but staying in the general area. I reported that to my supervisor as well. When it was time for me to leave the store, I was shaking, physically shaking, as I walked over to my mother's car and hopped in. I told her to drive carefully and watch for a tail, which I did the same. Nobody tailed us that day, thankfully, but I'm still quite shaken. When I was in college, I worked at an after-hours emergency clinic. My shift ended at midnight, and since the stores were much less crowded at that hour, I often did grocery shopping then. Side note, I'm a female and was in my early 20s when this happened. I go to the local store one night after work, park in a great spot since the lot is almost empty, and head towards the store. As I'm walking across the lot, I hear a male voice calling. I look to the right and see a man sitting in a blue station wagon about 5 spaces from where I'd parked. Having my attention now, he says,
"I'm sorry to bother you. My wife and I are trying to get home, but we've run out of gas. She's in the store now asking for help. Could you spare a few dollars so we can get gas to go home?"
Now normally, I don't mind helping out someone who's down on his luck, but something just felt so off about the situation. I replied that I was sorry and that I didn't have any cash. I went into the store to grab a few things I needed, and the whole time I was inside, I just couldn't shake the uneasy feeling I had. I was completely on edge by the time I made it to the checkout line. After I paid for my items, I started to walk out, but my body just didn't want to cooperate. I'd take a few steps and then I'd stop again. I turned back to the male cashier and said, I know I'm about to sound like such a girl, but could you see if someone could walk me to my car? There was a really creepy guy out there earlier, and I just don't feel comfortable." He took some of my bags in his hands, so it wouldn't be so obvious that he was trying to escort me, and said he'd walk me out since he didn't have any customers. To exit the store, you have to go through 2 sets of sliding doors. We walked through the first set, and I stopped cold. The freaking station wagon was now parked right next to my car. I told the cashier this, and he told me that he wouldn't let anything happen to me. We walked through the second set of double doors and started walking towards my car. About this time, the station wagon starts up and the driver pulls out of the parking spot. It was then that I noticed that there was no wife in the car, but there was another man. I don't know what these guys were planning on doing, and I'm glad I never had to find out, thanks to my impromptu bodyguard. Back when I was 18, I worked as a Tim Horton supervisor, and a lot of the time, I would do a closing shift, which was around 4 p.m. to midnight. Usually. Sometimes, if it was a particularly busy night, I would have to stay later to clear up and take inventory. Also, a lot of the time, it was just myself, as the baker wouldn't start until 2 a.m. My issues began when I started to notice two men, who I presumed were father and son, coming in every day. This wasn't unusual, but they would watch the staff and stay for hours at a time. I'm talking 6 hours worth of sitting and just watching. They wouldn't even order anything. Gradually, they formed an attachment to one employee and would always find ways to talk to her. They seemed to know her schedule and would bring her gifts such as flowers and handwritten notes. She would try to fend them off, but they got pretty insistent, and it got to the point of the employee not wanting to work there anymore. I was quite close with her, and I knew that she really needed the job, as she was a single mother. So I voiced my concerns to the managers, and they told me that there was little they could do. Although they did say that they could ban the people from our side of the building, but we were joined to a Wendy's, and they can't ban them from that side. This approach did not seem to work, and only aggravated the men further. They started coming and staying for even longer periods of time, and soon after, the employee quit. They approached me and asked everything about her, but I told them that I didn't know anything. This is about the time they switched their attention to me. After several months of similar patterns as previous, I started to compile as much information about them as I could so I could build a case for the police, license plates, first names, make of vehicle, and the town they came from. Then after 4 months of fending off their advances, things got out of hand. I worked a particularly late night. We shut the doors at 10 p.m. and I was alone until 2 a.m., finishing just as the baker arrived. Upon leaving, I noticed the men's van still in the parking lot. It was parked just 2 stalls away from mine, when earlier it was on the entire other side of the lot. It's safe to say that my spidey senses were tingling, and I asked the baker to walk me to my car. Sure enough, I saw them, sitting in the van. I pulled away and drove fast, but to my horror, I saw that they were following me. I tried to shake them, yet failed miserably due to the lack of traffic. Hard to run from someone on a straight 50k zone, with nothing but green lights. I did not want to lead them to my house, so I pulled out my phone, and of course, it was dead. Of all days. After 20 minutes of driving around aimlessly, my luck changed, and I saw a police car up ahead, so I did the only thing I could think of. I passed a cop doing 80 kilometers per hour and got myself pulled over. After explaining the story to the police and giving him the men's information, I was let go on a warning. The next day, I found out that the information I gave to the police got the men arrested. They were wanted for an attack on a Dairy Queen employee from my town, but the police were not able to identify them. The employee that had quit also started working again. Plus, it caused momentum to get a change in my scheduling so that there are always more than one employee at a time. Okay, so a little backstory before I tell you one of the crazy experiences of mine that happened during my 2-year security career from 2013 to 2015. I'm a 6'7" male in Australia. I'd like to think that I'm a fairly tough and intimidating person, but some of the shit that used to go on at the mall I used to work at during the night shift still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very, very large. Probably the largest in my state, I'd say. And all the way up to about 8:30 p.m. It would still be quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we manage to usher out all the stragglers, and only at about 11 p.m. would all of the business owners have left. My job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure that there was no one sticking around after hours. We didn't have guns or batons, only a can of mace that was very rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around trying to break into shops after dark, but they were normally far outnumbered by the 4 to 5 of us on shift at the time, and they would usually be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. One night though, shit started getting really weird for me on the night shift. So I'd say it was about 2 o'clock and I was standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This was only a part of the mall that had any light at night due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating though, I heard a dull scraping noise from the hallway leading off from the food courts and to some of the toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge, and I flicked on my flashlight without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway, flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 or 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder until I was at the end of the hallway and there was toilet doors to the left and right of me. The noise quickly stopped, and I paused for a moment, listening hard through the crack of the door. I could tell the sound was coming from the female's toilet though. I gripped the handle and opened the door a tiny little crack. The noise was very clear now, and didn't have me scared, but confused. I yelled, "Oi, who's in there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused a moment, listening hard through the tiny crack of the door, and I swear to fucking God, I could hear breathing. Low, male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and flicked on my radio. "This is 1-3. I need help. In the food court bathrooms, I think there's someone here." No response. This was really strange, and it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio, and now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point, but there was no response. In fact, now there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom, "Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault that you'll never walk again." I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was the metal noise? What the fuck is even happening? I very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight across the room. All of the cubicles were open, which was weird, but other than that, the room was totally empty. I was seriously shitting myself now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me, scared to the core. I let out a faint. "This is some horror movie shit, eh? Come out!" When I heard the long, whining squeak of the door behind me, I spun around, basically crying at this point, and shone my torch on a fucking massive man, at least a head taller than me, or so it seemed in my state at the time. It was Caucasian, and at least in his 40s with matted, gray hair all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead, still in the middle of his action. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty fucking smile like a kid would make when he gets caught stealing biscuits or some shit like that. I'm not gonna lie, I was so scared, I froze. He lifted his finger up to his mouth. Shh. Before swinging the door open all the way and sprinting out with what looked like some type of small metal box in his hands. Turns out that he was just behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so fucking close to him, and I didn't even notice him. He could have killed me if he had a weapon or something, and that thought still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on to telling my coworkers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what had happened. They all had similar stories, but none of them were as much of a close shave as mine. I worked the night shift for another week after that before I quit. I'm not sticking around in a job like that. For some reason, my radio fucked itself. Why? I'll never know.